What if the loneliness you felt your whole life wasn't a problem to be fixed, but a sign that you were set apart before you were even born? I want you to think about something for a second. There are nearly 8 billion people on this planet. 8 billion hearts beating. 8 billion lives unfolding. 8 billion stories being written right now. And somewhere in the middle of all of that noise, you found this video. Not by accident. I don't believe in accidents when it comes to the things of God. The number 144,000 appears in the book of Revelation. And for centuries, theologians have debated it. Denominations have argued over it. Scholars have written entire books trying to explain it away or contain it inside a system that makes sense to the human mind. But I'm not here to debate. I'm here because something in you already knows. You've always felt different. Not better than anyone, just different. Like you were tuned to a frequency that most people around you couldn't quite hear. Like you were watching the same world everyone else was watching, but seeing something underneath it that they weren't seeing. And for a long time, you probably thought something was wrong with you. Maybe you still do. But what if nothing is wrong with you? What if everything you've been carrying, the sensitivity, the isolation, the questions that never quite got answered, the sense that you were made for something you can't fully name yet? What if all of that is evidence of a design, not a flaw? A design. That's what I want to talk about today. Not a doctrine, not a theology lecture. I want to talk about you and what God may have already written about you before your first breath ever entered your lungs. Open your Bible to Revelation chapter 7. You'll find it there, this image of 144,000 people, sealed by God, marked on their foreheads, called out from every tribe, not randomly selected, not picked because they tried harder or prayed longer or had cleaner lives than everyone else. Sealed. Before the storm came, before the great tribulation, before the earth shook. Think about what it means to be sealed before the storm. When a storm rolls in and you're still outside, you scramble. You look for shelter. You try to protect yourself. But if you're already inside, already sealed, the storm changes nothing about your position. You are already covered, already secure, already known. That's the picture Revelation gives us of these 144,000. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. George, I'm not Jewish. I'm not from one of the 12 tribes of Israel. What does this have to do with me? And that's a fair question. It really is. But here's what I've come to understand. After years of walking with God and walking with people who are walking with God, the number 144,000 is not just a census. It is a symbol of a kind of person, a kind of calling, a kind of seal that God places on specific lives in every generation that marks them for something the rest of the world was never meant to carry. Not saved more, not loved more, but assigned differently. There's a difference between being in God's family and being called to a specific assignment within that family. Every believer is loved, but not every believer is called to the same post. A father loves all his children equally, but he might pull one of them aside and say, "I need you for something specific, something I can't trust to just anyone." That pulling aside, that's what I'm talking about today. And if you felt it, if there has been a quiet, persistent sense that God has His hand on your life in a way that doesn't always look like blessing from the outside, but feels like weight from the inside, then this is for you. I think about a young man named Joseph. You know his story. Son of Jacob, beloved of his father, hated by his brothers. Now think about Joseph as a teenager, wearing that coat his father gave him, having dreams he couldn't explain to anyone around him. Dreams about the sun and the moon and stars bowing down. Dreams that were so big they didn't fit inside the reality he was living in at the time. He didn't choose those dreams. They came to him. He didn't choose to be the one his father favored. That was poured onto him before he ever understood what it would cost. And it cost him everything for a season. It cost him his family, his freedom, his reputation. He ended up in a pit, then in a prison, with nothing around him that looked like destiny. But here's the thing about people who carry a specific seal from God. The pit is never the end of the story. The prison is never the final chapter. Because the assignment doesn't come from the outside. It's written on the inside. And you can take everything away from someone who is sealed by God. You can strip their title, their relationships, their comfort, their certainty, and the calling remains. Because it was never based on their circumstances. It was based on God's intention. That's what makes the 144,000 so striking to me. These are people who endure. Not because they are superhuman, not because they don't feel the pressure, but because something inside them holds when everything outside them breaks. Do you know that feeling? When your life fell apart around you, and somehow, underneath all the pain and confusion, there was something in you that didn't collapse. Something quiet that said, "This is not the end. This is not who you are. Hold on." That wasn't willpower. That was the seal. Here's something nobody likes to talk about when they discuss being chosen. Being chosen is not comfortable. It sounds like it should be. It sounds like the kind of thing that makes your life easier, more protected, more blessed, in the way we usually define blessings. Nice house, smooth relationships, things just working out. But that's not the biblical pattern. Not for the ones who carried the deepest assignments. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he ever stood in front of Pharaoh. 40 years. That's not a short season. That's not a momentary detour. That's a lifetime of preparation happening in a place where nobody could see it. And if you had met Moses at year 20, halfway through that invisible season, he probably would not have looked like someone on the verge of one of the greatest assignments in human history. He would have looked like a shepherd, an ordinary man doing ordinary work in an ordinary place. Nothing about his life from the outside would have told you that God was about to speak through a burning bush and rewrite the course of an entire nation. That is the nature of preparation. It rarely looks like what it's producing. Paul the Apostle, who wrote more of the New Testament than anyone else, spent years in obscurity after his encounter on the road to Damascus, years in the desert, alone, pressing into what had been deposited in him, not yet released into what it was going to become. And Enoch. I love the story of Enoch because it's so short in the Bible that most people skip right past it. The scripture simply says that Enoch walked with God, and then he was not, because God took him. No long biography, no record of miracles, no public ministry that we can trace. Just a man who walked so closely with heaven that one day the boundary between here and there became too thin to hold him. That's what deep assignment looks like sometimes. Not always a stage, not always a crowd. Sometimes it's just a man, walking alone with God, in a direction nobody else is walking, carrying something nobody else can quite see. If that describes your life right now, if you've been in a season that looks more like wilderness than like promise, I want you to hear this clearly. The wilderness is not punishment. The wilderness is preparation. God does not waste a single thing that happens to a person he has sealed. Not the rejection, not the delay, not the years when it seemed like everyone around you was moving forward and you were standing still. All of it was being worked into something. All of it was shaping the vessel that would eventually carry what God intended to pour through it. You are not behind. You are being built. Let me get specific now, because I think some of you need to hear your own story reflected back to you. There are marks patterns that show up consistently in the lives of people who carry this kind of specific, set-apart calling. And when I say marks, I don't mean achievements. I mean things that have happened to you, or ways you've always been, that you never quite chose. The first mark is this. You've always felt like a stranger, even in rooms full of people who love you. Not unloved, not unwelcome, just aware that you see things differently, that your conversations naturally go deeper than most people want to go. That small talk exhausts you in a way that long, honest, searching conversations never do. That you walk into places and sense things, atmospheres, tensions, undercurrents, that other people don't seem to notice. That's not social anxiety. That's spiritual perception. The second mark, You've been broken in ways that should have broken you permanently but didn't. I mean real breaking. The kind that comes from betrayal by someone you trusted completely, or loss that redefined who you were, or a season where everything you built collapsed and you had to start again from nothing. And you came through it different than you went in, but you came through. Scarred, yes. Changed, yes. But standing. That kind of resilience doesn't come from good genetics or strong willpower. It comes from something sealed inside you that the enemy couldn't reach, no matter how hard he tried. The third mark. Your hunger for God has never been fully satisfied by religion alone. You've sat in churches and felt something missing. You've gone through the motions and known, deep inside, that there was more, that God was more wild and more intimate and more present than any Sunday morning could quite contain. And that hunger, that holy dissatisfaction, has driven you into places of prayer and scripture and seeking that most people around you didn't quite understand. That hunger is a compass. It is pointing you towards something that has already been prepared for you. The fourth mark. You carry a burden for people who are lost or broken that sometimes feels too heavy for one person. You see someone struggling, and something in you responds before your mind even processes what's happening. You've been described as empathetic, or as someone who takes on too much, or as someone who cares too deeply about things that aren't your responsibility. And maybe you've tried to shut that down, tried to build walls around it, tried to stop feeling so much, but it always comes back. Because it wasn't trained into you. It was placed in you. That burden is a form of intercession that your spirit knows how to carry, even when your mind doesn't know what to call it. And listen, I need to pause here for just a moment, because what I'm about to share with you is connected to everything we've been talking about. My name is George, and for years, I've walked alongside people who carry exactly this kind of calling. People who feel the weight of being set apart, who sense that God has marked their life for something specific, but who have never had a language for it, never had a map, never had someone look them in the eye and say, "What you're carrying is real, and there's a reason you've been carrying it." That burden, that calling, is exactly what led me to develop the secret protocol. Because I couldn't keep having these conversations one person at a time and not give people something they could hold on to, something they could return to in the quiet moments, in the hard seasons, in the nights when the silence of heaven feels louder than any answer. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived. Things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. Now here's where I need to be really honest with you, because I think there's a misunderstanding about what it means to be chosen, and it's a dangerous one. Being part of the 144,000 living inside that kind of specific calling is not a status symbol. It is not a badge you wear. It is not a reason to look at people who don't seem to carry the same assignment and think you are more valuable to God than they are. The 144,000 inches revelation are not seated at a table being served. They are sealed for service. They are marked for mission. They are prepared not so they can live comfortably in their calling, but so they can carry something into the earth that the earth desperately needs. Think about the way light works. You light a single candle in a completely dark room, and it changes the entire atmosphere. Not because the candle is trying to be impressive, not because the candle is performing, just because a candle was made to burn, and when it does what it was made to do, darkness simply cannot stay what it was. That's the picture I have of the people who carry this kind of sealing. They're not meant to be famous. They're not meant to be admired. They're meant to burn in their homes, in their workplaces, in their neighborhoods, in their friendships, in the quiet corners of the earth that nobody else is paying attention to. And sometimes the burning is invisible. Sometimes the greatest work God is doing through a sealed life is work that will never be seen on any platform, celebrated in any conference, recognized by any crowd. It's work done in prayer at 2 in the morning. It's a word spoken to one broken person at exactly the right moment. It's a life lived with such quiet faithfulness that 50 years from now, someone who barely remembers your name will trace the beginning of their own faith back to something you said once, in passing, that you don't even remember saying. That is not small work. That is the work of the kingdom. I want to speak now specifically to the people who are in a difficult season. Not a difficult month, a difficult season. The kind of season where you've questioned everything, your calling, your faith, your sense of identity, your understanding of who God is and what He's doing. The kind of season where the silence of heaven has been louder and more confusing than any answer could have been. I've been there, more than once, and I want to tell you what I've learned. God is most actively building what He most deeply intends to use in the seasons when you feel the least movement. When a farmer plants a seed, there is a period where nothing visible is happening. The soil looks exactly the same. The field is quiet. If you didn't know better, you might walk past that field and think nothing is growing there. Nothing is being prepared. The season is wasted. But underneath, everything is happening. The seed is breaking open. The roots are going down. The infrastructure of the entire future harvest is being established in the dark, in the hidden place, where no human eye can reach it. That's your season. The silence is not rejection. The delay is not denial. The apparent stillness is not evidence that God has forgotten your address or lost track of your story. He hasn't. What He's doing is deeper than what you can currently measure. And the depth He's establishing in you right now, the character, the endurance, the intimacy, the rootedness, that depth is going to be what makes everything that comes next possible. You cannot rush the roots. You can only stay in the soil. So if you're in a hard season, stay. Don't run. Don't numb yourself with distraction. Don't spend so much energy trying to understand what God is doing that you stop being present to the fact that He is doing it. Stay in the soil. The season will turn. I think we sometimes picture the 144,000, or anyone with a significant calling, as living in a kind of spiritual highlight reel. Constant visions, constant breakthroughs, constant confirmation from heaven. And some days, yes, those moments come. The kind of moments where you feel the presence of God so clearly, it almost doesn't seem real. Where Scripture opens up to you, like a door you didn't even know was there. Where prayer shifts from something you're doing to something being done through you. But most days, a sealed life looks a lot like an ordinary life. It looks like getting up in the morning and choosing to trust God before you have any evidence that the day will go the way you need it to go. It looks like forgiving the same person for the same thing, again, because unforgiveness is a chain and you refuse to let bitterness be your inheritance. It looks like showing up faithfully to the small assignments, the quiet ones, the unnoticed ones, because you understand that faithfulness in the small things is what positions you for the larger ones. Luke 16:10. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. That's not a motivational quote. That's a principle of the kingdom. God doesn't bypass the small and jump straight to the significant. He builds through layers. And each layer of faithfulness becomes the foundation for the next thing He intends to place on your life. So don't despise the ordinary days. Don't wish them away in a hurry to get to the dramatic ones. The ordinary days are where the real formation happens. The ordinary days are where you learn what you're actually made of. Not in the moments of spiritual high emotion, but in the Monday morning moments when nobody's watching and you still choose right. That's the life of a sealed one. Not always spectacular, but always rooted, always moving. Always, even in the most mundane moments, oriented towards something that the world cannot see. I want to leave you with this. You are not an accident. You are not a coincidence. You are not the product of random forces colliding at random moments that happen to produce a person with your specific hunger, your specific pain, your specific way of seeing the world. You were written before you were born. And what was written about you? The assignment, the calling, the sealing that is still true. No matter what season you're in, no matter how far the visible reality seems from the life you sense you were made for, no matter how long the silence has lasted or how heavy the weight has felt. And I want to be clear about something, because I think it matters deeply. The enemy of your soul has spent a significant amount of energy trying to convince you that what makes you different is actually what disqualifies you. He has whispered that your sensitivity makes you weak, that your isolation means you've been forgotten, that the delay in your story is evidence that God passed over you when he was handing out assignments. That is a lie, and I need you to hear that clearly. The enemy does not waste his effort on people who don't carry anything valuable. He doesn't work overtime against empty vessels. The very fact that there has been a persistent battle over your identity, over your sense of purpose, over your willingness to believe that God has something specific for your life, that battle is itself confirmation that there is something inside you worth fighting for. You don't chase after nothing. You pursue what matters. And the enemy pursues what God has already marked. So let the warfare itself be a sign. Let the resistance be evidence. Let the weight of the calling, even before you fully understand what the calling is, remind you that you were not chosen because you had it all together. You were chosen because God looked at you before time began and said, "That one, that life, that story I want, my hand on it." The 144,000 are not a distant, unreachable category of spiritual elite. They are a picture, a living image of people in every generation who said yes to a calling they didn't fully understand, who endured a season they didn't fully choose, who carried something for the sake of a world that didn't always notice them and kept going anyway. You are 0.001% of the world, not by accident, by design. God chose you before the foundations of the earth, before your mother knew your name, before you ever made a single choice in your life. He chose you, and he has not changed his mind. Now here's what I want to ask you, and I want you to think about this genuinely before you type your answer in the comments. Out of everything we talked about today, the marks, the seasons, the weight of being set apart, which one described your life most accurately? Which one made you pause and think, how did he know that? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your answer might be exactly what someone else who reads it needs to hear today. God bless you. I'll see you in the next one.